So to expect other people to be really efficient, it's not likely, otherwise we'd all be able to dev after a 2-week course. Well, anything you turn your hand to would only take 2 weeks and you'd be awesome at it and you'd be done.
Those woodworking courses that you've smashed now, wooden spoons?
Yeah, loads of wooden spoons. I'm sat next to one.
Wow.
Hello, welcome to Cloud Unplugged. I'm Jon Shanks.
And I'm Jay Keshur.
And we're going to be talking about how, as a platform engineer, would you do developer self-service with technologies that are in the industry already?
Yeah.
And what's the engineering effort you might have to do as a cloud platform engineering team to work out how to bring self-service to life? And so we probably want to caveat, just in case people haven't listened to the other can't speak today. People haven't listened to the other episodes on what we mean by self-service. So just to recap, developers don't have to wait for anything. There's a predefined set of commoditized stuff that they can just get, like a catalog
databases
of things.
or like storage or whatever else. Yeah.
Where to run their workloads, potentially patterns for those things of how they deploy their apps and things like that. So like a kind of traditional platform. None of this is new. There were platforms like that historically. But I think since the technologies have changed, people have aligned now to newer tech. So like obviously Kubernetes and containers and things like that. That's probably caused a bit of a change on needing those platforms still, but wanting to change the technologies that drive them under the hood. So yeah, the question is, knowing the technologies out there as they are, obviously Kubernetes doesn't have an opinion of self-service. It's about running containers and apps. The cloud doesn't really have an opinion massively other than CloudFormation. There's an assumption that whoever's doing that knows how to configure the settings for each cloud service against their API if you're going to do it programmatically. You wouldn't want people to go into the cloud accounts necessarily and just kind of do whatever they wanted.
Why?
Because they wouldn't know how to configure those things properly. So say you needed
just
things
to offset risk, basically. You wouldn't do it because they might screw something up and there'll be a data leak or reputational damage or something like that.
Definitely that, which is obviously the biggest thing. I think secondary to that is there's probably some, in most businesses, there'll be some architectural patterns like transit gateways and how do I hook into the networking and what are the DNS things and how does it get exposed and how do I get certificates? And so there's a bunch of operational stuff that might not be in the wheelhouse of developers to know about. So yeah, you could click around, but you might not get a working outcome necessarily, even if you were to click
and it
on
probably isn't
partial working outcome maybe.
It's not really the best use of that developer's time, right?
Yeah.
So really all you're trying to do is make sure that the people that are that know those functions are the ones that are making it easier for the developers who know how to code to do their jobs. So stay in your lane type thing.
Wow, Jay.
Yeah, I know, right? So make sure that you're kind of like just doing the things that you know how to do really well and execute on that. And if you're someone that knows networking and platforms and stuff like that, do that really well. Deliver a service to someone else and do the rest of their thing really well.
Yeah, exactly. So if we frame it under that lens of playing to people's strengths, you don't want to be putting everyone on Amazon courses or Google courses or Microsoft courses, right, to go and learn the cloud and then try and upskill your entire developers to like a certain level plus all the operational. So it's like, actually, it's just not good investment.
And it's funny, you say these things like going off and learning the cloud vendors and doing the certificates and all that kind of stuff doesn't actually teach you how to do it well.
No,
really. It just tells you what the technology is and maybe how to use it. It doesn't say this is how you scale that to your business. It doesn't say you string all of these things together, Git and CI/CD and the tools that you might use in your pipeline to get an outcome that's then easy to maintain and support and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because it's a sliding scale. Like experience counts for something. The same way as being a good dev would take experience, right? To learn all of the nuances and learn the language really well and how to do it properly and testing and iterating, all those things are still a discipline. Yeah. So to expect other people to be really efficient.
Just get it after a 3-day course.
It's not likely, otherwise we'd all be able to dev after a 2-week course, right, and be really good developers as much or
Is that why
anything.
Okay.
Well, anything you turn your hand to would only take 2 weeks, and you'd be awesome at it, and you'd be done.
Those woodworking courses that you've smashed now. What,
really,
wooden spoons?
Really well. Yeah, loads of wooden spoons. I'm sat next to one.
Wow.
That was too easy.
That was, not sure about
but yeah, so anyway, if we're looking at then how to do it, because if you were to go into a team now and knowing the landscape of all the technologies and what there is, how do you take something that, because the industry, a lot of the open source tech necessarily isn't self-service paradigmed, but there's a lot of different techs.
Should we talk about what people did say 8-9 years ago, and then how that's developed? Well, I think it's important, right? Because the way that the paradigm of self-service has changed. So back in the day, I think people would say you can put a request in and get a Linux box or something like that, and that's your self-service. You can self-serve by using a ticket to get a really not outcome-driven thing, and that not outcome-driven thing might be...
That isn't self-service though, under our definition we just said, which is you don't have to wait.
It's kind of...
There's no wait time.
True.
You can consume, it's commoditized, and you can go and get it, but without...
But people,
the risk of also going into the account to do it.
So the next level of that, I think, is then where it met cloud. So people maybe did that 10, 12 years ago with, a request into a team, like Linux team or a Windows team or something like that. And then they would get a box that they could access. And then a few years later, and they'd wrap that thing with Jenkins or something where it's oh, I've got some manual stuff that I have to do, but I'm just going to automate it so you don't have to put a ticket in. And now you can, instead of requesting a ticket, you just go to some Jenkins front end and click a button, put your thing in or whatever, and then you get you get a Linux machine or a Windows machine or whatever that you can access. And now it's and that was self-service because you're not really waiting for a thing. You're just, but it's not really attached to any sort of value, and it obfuscates a bunch of stuff done by other people to really make that a thing. Someone has to go in and maintain the scripts that it will take them to build whatever it is that they're doing, getting the operating system, the storage, the networking, all of that configured in a potentially private cloud scenario. And then fast forward a few more years and cloud now exists, and you could get that same outcome. So a Linux box, let's say, and you have VPCs and networking and all of that stuff that's now defined as a template, as code or whatever. So the way that you're self-serving and the operational overhead is smaller because you don't have to write scripts. You've just got to write configuration, right? So that's kind of changed. And now it's even easier because the API, the configuration that you have to write is even smaller. Now it's I can have a, Docker image that has Linux in it, or a Docker image that has Windows in it, Windows Server or whatever, and just point it at a cluster to run, right? So I don't even have to, the configuration that I have to now maintain as a person creating self-service isn't all of the operating system, the networking, all of those things, because that's already taken care of somewhere else. So the way to provide self-service, if you're that team that's trying to provide it, is easier in one aspect because it's less to maintain, but it's hard because you have to make the experience really good, and you have to think about the outcome rather than what they're self-serving.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. So now you're saying like containers have simplified things. They don't have Windows Server in them though, by the way. They're just going to be like, obviously it's just going to be, could be a scratch image. It's just
Windows Server Core, yeah.
Yeah, it could be just a scratch image of barely anything in the container,
totally.
Right? That's what you want in really, like
of course
the libraries of just the bare bones of what you need, not
that's how to do it well.
You're not going to promote doing it, otherwise you basically not taking advantage of it.
Of containers overall, no, but I was like saying the equivalent outcome over time, right? So
I see. You mean the journey that we went on?
Yes.
Sorry, now. Yeah. But then, so you're saying that there's now the containers, and that's simplified a lot. But I'm still confused with the self-service. So you still have machines, VMs, like workloads are a thing. CPU's going to be a thing needed, right? So processes, apps are all processes in the end. So they're going to need processing power to run them.
Yeah.
Something has to get them there. And those applications have to be done and delivered in a way that makes sense. I've already spoken about well-architected frameworks and all these other opinions that the cloud has on certain levels of enterprise. So it's not that you can just, it's not just that the technology of that bit is the end, as in like
easy,
just use containers and you're done.
No, of course not,
So I'm saying, how do you do self-service though? Even if you've got containers, that doesn't mean you now have self-service. Or just because a dev has got containers doesn't mean that you're now self-service, you don't need to do anything.
Well, it's like partial, right? So they might self-serve a part, they might be able to self-serve a part of their workload, which is where a lot of organizations probably stop. Like they give someone access to a multi-tenanted Kubernetes cluster or something like that, and there's like, oh yeah, we do self-service. You can go and get some compute and some storage and things like that.
I see, yeah. I suppose.
But then that's not like...
There's portability of the container, which means the developer can use their own machine.
Yeah.
Right? That's it, right? So you can like iterate, and the type of technology that gets deployed is consistent even locally, whereas before that's a change because you wouldn't have ever had you've had to do all the vagrant stuff. We'd have to like mimic out what it was going to be in the real world outside of dev. So at least you got that, but then what you're saying is people might just say self-service means to developers, I've got a Kubernetes cluster that I've just created and everyone's going to share it.
Yeah.
And if you can deploy your app in it with a deployment file, that's self-service.
I think there's what I'm kind of saying is because it's self-service, some people can be such an ambiguous term. Some of the people in the industry might have defined that as having Kubernetes is self-service. Now that you have Kubernetes is self-service. Obviously, we don't think that's true, right? Because the developer isn't able to self-serve for all of the bits that they might need, that there are patterns for in that organization. And that's that's like...
exactly. Yeah, there's be wait time.
Exactly, right?
And even to get access to the Kubernetes, presumably was wait time.
Potentially, yeah, exactly.
It's not like...
Someone has to tick a box or give you access or put you into the right group, whatever.
And then environments, I'm presuming there'd be wait time.
Yeah. Namespaces, are you giving people the ability to create namespaces in that Kubernetes cluster or not? And then what happens? What do they have their own limits to sort of manage, or are you configuring that for them and stuff as well? Like there's a level of self-service. And then when it comes to like past their workload, so they've got an app, let's say, and that app needs, I don't know, some sort of cloud resource, a database or some storage or whatever else. How do they get that?
Yeah.
How are they going to get access to either the people that have the skills to give them those things, or a well-defined thing that they can just configure in a way that they have the knowledge of to just get the outcome. So that's a question. How do they do it, John?
I'm still waiting for you to answer my question.
What's your question?
How do you take the technologies in the industry and make them self-service for the things you just mentioned? So it's
how do you make them self-service?
So you already given some examples. So it's like, obviously Kubernetes is a certain point, but you've just said that's not really true self-service. So
no.
So like, what are the technologies that you would use, I guess? Like, what are the self-service technologies that exist in the industry that you could take? That's what I'm saying. Because there's a paradigm that's going around that's self-service, which is obviously a good thing. Nothing like it's obviously effective to have productive people getting things they need.
Yeah.
So how would you look at, like, one, what technology would you want to standardize on?
Well, maybe the industry is standardized a little bit on some of this technology, right? Because I don't think you would find a single DevOps or platform engineer CV that doesn't say Terraform on it.
Awkward.
Does yours don't hire Jon as a platform engineer?
Well, weirdly, do you know what was quite strange? I can't remember where it was, but there was some market research. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was quite low on that.
What? No
way. I know. I mean, I'll get a
chance.
bit dubious sometimes with the research, but
Have they
cloud
been like,
formation was way higher than Terraform was, which I found
really
a bit
surprising?
bamboozling.
Wow.
I even think Ansible was higher. So I don't know how they've obviously got. I mean, I'll find out where that was. Could have been in the Flexera
Maybe
report or something. So it was definitely
interesting.
something in some report I was looking at. I'll find out because it's not very useful. But
Yeah.
I was shocked because I assumed it was like going to be huge.
Okay, so let me change that. YAML or HCL or whatever it is, right? So you're going to use a language to define the thing, to define the configuration of a state that you want in cloud or private cloud or whatever it is. So one, that would be the basis of how you consume something. Not self-service, that's just how to define the thing that you're going to consume. Then,
but would you pick a certain tech? Because obviously just saying this configuration, I mean, it's an API.
Yeah. So I'd probably pick
so you pick
the
Terraform,
most.
would you?
I'd probably pick Terraform because one, it has like you'd find the skills in the market really easily.
Yeah.
It's extensible. It has great support overall. Sure, the portability isn't great because obviously you have providers that you use in Terraform, and the AWS provider isn't the same as the Google provider or whatever.
The clouds aren't the same.
Yeah, exactly, right? So, but the skills that you learn using Terraform means that it's hopefully not too difficult to port. Well, I mean, it's going to be difficult to port, but it's not as difficult to port, say, if you were using like CloudFormation versus ARM templates or whatever else.
Yeah.
So, yes, I'd pick Terraform. Then I would try and figure out what my company's policies are, security policies, like how am I going to use Terraform? How am I going to let other people know how to use Terraform properly? How am I going to centralize the kind of the patterns that I've created in Terraform, like modules? Is it just in Git? Am I publishing them somewhere? Like, what am I using for that? Do you have any opinions or answers in this space? No, cool, staying quiet.
No, listen. No, I think you're right. I mean, it's good. I probably agree. Most people I've seen on the CV, irrespective of this report, most people's CVs I've seen tend to have Terraform on them. Not
is it because the job application says only Terraform need apply?
But I just found that a bit bewildering, so I just thought I'd say it because I remember like being really bamboozled by that stat anyway myself. Doesn't really make sense to the market that I've seen. But then Terraform takes a certain skill level, obviously, so people can learn it, but it's changing these new APIs and new cloud services. So you kind of have to learn the DSL framework of Terraform, even though there's loads of modules out there that you can reuse.
Yeah.
You still need to know how to configure.
Don't know if
the
it's
service.
good though, right? That's the thing with these modules. Like, how are you going to know if it's a good module? Like,
you can't tell the quality of the module.
Yeah, exactly.
But then there is linting and the checker. So I guess all those things, like standardizing on those, I think makes sense. And tests, the lint and the checkoffs of the world, putting those in CI pipeline and enforcing them.
But even like frameworks like TerraTest or whatever that you can use on the actual thing. But then also though the modules, I think you have to work out how much. If you think about self-service, you need to work out how much somebody knows about that service first, because you have to think, right, there's a developer.
they might not going to know there's 36 parameters of the configuration of that Terraform module, right? So maybe most of these aren't particularly relevant. So I need to work out what is relevant to them in the business and what isn't. And so if I only want to give very few choices to people in relation to that service, so it could be just, if it was a database, you choose the type of database, but then from that point it could be just a database name and that's it. Or maybe it's database name and region, right? So it's like how much is configurable from them and how much do we want to standardize on?
I think that's really where the value is, right? Because it's super easy to just give someone access to do something. Yeah. But it's hard to make it easy to consume, right? Yeah. So like even, I don't know, say something really mundane, taxis, right? Anyone could just like put their hand up and get a black cab if they're in London, whatever. But obviously Uber had or any of these taxi companies, they did quite a lot of good engineering to make it accessible and easy for you to press a button and for the taxi to come to where you are, right? That took a lot of engineering feat. And just in the same way, like being able to just type in the, say, name of the database that you're gonna want, or say the instance type or the storage amount, instead of having to configure whether it's going to be encrypted at rest, in transit, all of the other things that you would have to do to, like, with skills to kind of simplify. Like, it takes time, experience, effort to do all of those things. So yeah, I'd have something to do that. Do you know of anything that does that?
Yeah, I think there's open source things that do it. There's Terraform providers in Kubernetes that people have created. Different companies have done it to a point.
Kubernetes, that's one.
Kubernetes.
TF operators and
there's different Terraform operators. I think it's the Terraform operator by HashiCorp.
Yeah.
But I think that works with I think it's
Cloud.
Coupled to their SaaS offering. But I guess there are technologies in that space where people have looked at it more from a Kubernetes perspective of like, how do I back into Kubernetes to operate?
Well, because presumably that's where their apps are.
Exactly, yeah.
That's where...
And what the developers are already maybe doing or deploying in a place already.
So it's standardise an experience based on what they already know and have. Yeah, exactly.
So it's like there's already a common interface, which is Kubernetes.
Yeah.
They've already learned that.
Yeah.
Rather than me then going off and saying, go and learn Terraform as well. You're like, actually, can I bring Terraform to Kubernetes?
Because then...
Terraform experience... No, a Kubernetes experience to Terraform.
Because then you also, if you're doing it without Kubernetes, then you also have to have like something to run the Terraform, and that's CI. So you're moving you're then changing the experience for the developer to get in something. Yeah, well, it's just you're instantiating something from different places. So like you might get your database via CI, but then you'll get your, compute and networking or whatever via, I don't know, GitOps or one away from CI.
Or a ticket.
Yeah, or a ticket.
Or maybe all tickets.
It's just,
who knows? Probably all tickets, to be fair, in most cases.
Nice self-service, Jon.
No, I'm saying without it, it'll be mostly tickets.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you want that. You want an environment and their application and their components all to be managed in the same way, because that's the artifact. That's the artifact that developer ships, right? It's the whole application together, or the services that make up their application. Yeah. And for that to be defined as in different ways as separate things just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think there was a blog as well, so I'm just referencing loads of other people. A blog of Spotify, and they had what was the metric? Basically, it was the number of tools that the developer had to interface with, and there was a metric associated with that. I don't think it was like
high is bad.
High would be bad, yeah, but I don't think it was like cognitive load necessarily on that. There was some specific metric, but I can't remember the terminology of it. But if there was obviously a lot of tools that they kept having to use, context switching.
Right.
So they classify context switching as the amount of tools you have to interface with.
Yeah.
And that's how they measured it. So it's like if you keep switching to tool to tool to tool, that means you've context switched away from one thing into another to go and get an outcome, and then back to maybe another tool to then go and get a different outcome. So that obviously for them was like quite suboptimal.
Yeah.
I guess that's what really we're talking about here. If you standardized on a common interface, which is Kubernetes, then there is only one tool.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're not switching context like repeatedly all over the place to try and work out.
It's funny that because there's obviously nuances to that, right? Let's say you've got a tool and you've say bought in another tool or you've integrated another tool. Depending on the quality of that integration, you could be context switching again, right? So let's say I don't know, bad example, but because these are good products, but let's say like GitHub, it now has, CI, and it also has like security, integration and things like that. If they were badly integrated, then maybe it has like a different front end or something like that. So it looks like and feels like different tools. The experience isn't consistent. It's a hard kind of learning curve to understand how the new tool has been melded together and things like that. But if it's a good experience, it's consistent, you can click through it in the same way, the developer doesn't have to learn a whole new paradigm because you've just exposed more information, then the experience is good and the context switching is less.
Yeah.
Because that happens a lot in this industry.
Well, I suppose you would have then switched context to a point. I think it's just the degree, I guess then you're saying it's the degree of complexity of the thing you've switched to, which is then taking more time and energy because the quality of that was bad. So if you actually can't get an outcome quick, even after you've context switched, there's obviously context switching itself and there's a time investment on whatever you've had to switch to get the outcome.
So all of it together is the...
No, that wasn't. They just had a number of tools.
Oh, okay.
I'm just saying though. But actually, if you to be a bit more granular, you could, like what you're saying is like you could have a bad tool or a bad implementation of that tool. And so it's not just the number of tools. I guess it's the quality of the tool and how well it drives the outcome on top of how many of them there are.
Yeah.
But it's just hard to measure, I suppose, unless you to get all like the data metrics. But I suppose for self-service though, if you are standardized on Kubernetes, which is what you're suggesting, then there's now one tool. Then I guess you got the quality of what it is.
There was a quote somewhere that said like Kubernetes is now like the default operating system for all of compute and networking and everything across like the whole world, right? And that's so like something like Kubernetes, an orchestrator, scheduler, whatever. It's so true. Like cloud providers themselves run this. That's where it's come from. Yeah. So in some aspect, you're running something that looks like this, and the closer you are to it, the more value that you're going to be able to drive from it potentially, but abstracting away enough of the things that don't offer any value.
Yeah.
So
I think that's what you've got to understand your customer, isn't it, at the end of the day? And I think that's the point of, like, if you're talking about self-service for developers, the technologies aren't designed for those people. It's just a fact. They were designed for specialists who understood cloud, and it didn't have an opinion specifically.
It can't have an opinion. It has to,
because the business needs to define what it is in relation to the cloud, and the cloud doesn't have an opinion either because they're like, we don't know what you need. We've got loads of customers.
Exactly.
Here's
so
all the configuration
customers.
of all of the different things you can do.
Yeah.
So somebody has to go and decide what the right level of configuration for those things is, and then on top of that, what the input is from somebody else at the minimal amount of effort that they have to put in to get the outcome.
And they because it's configuration, they change their opinion, right?
Yeah.
So recently, for example, when you created an S3 bucket, well, previously, when you created an S3 bucket, it was publicly accessible. Like that was the default. And fairly recently, they changed it so the default is now it's privately accessible. Yeah. No one gets access, right? That's a big change for something. Well, it's a massively impactful change for something so small. But like,
it's in some, I guess the design of it back then was to like
public,
host websites or
exactly,
like, it was more
exactly.
public cloud with a public S3 bucket.
Yes.
Because it kind of began with S3.
That's how it works,
much,
Well, that was the first service.
Yeah. So that kind of makes sense. But yeah, God, that's taken so long to to change that default.
Exactly. What, 15 years?
15 years and £8 bazillion of people getting compromised. And we're like, do you know what? Maybe this default.
Maybe we got it wrong.
Default private.
Exactly.
It's like a default deny all on traffic.
Yeah.
It's like maybe
right.
any, and anyone will take traffic to this is not a good. No, it's like the millionth
self-service.
time
Self-service.
Millionth time we've been hacked now. Like, I really think we should change the default.
No, we're sticking by public cloud.
Yeah, it's public cloud. Yeah, wow. So, and but yeah, I guess you're saying you choose Kubernetes, the old Terraforms, bit of the hashies, and then Chekhov and linting and Terrasets and all these other things. Terratest, sorry. Terrasets. I'm thinking of stack sets for some reason. Yeah. Terratest, yeah.
What else? Obviously, an operator to put it into Kubernetes.
So you'd write an operator or look for one.
You look for one, yeah. There's loads that exist. And then something to make it kind of declarative. So probably use, say, Flux or Argo or something like that to wrap it all so that I can get a consistent outcome in every environment that I'm in.
You can get a consistent outcome?
The developer.
Oh, right.
I'm designing it, right?
Oh, for yourself?
For the developer. You asked me, what would you put into a platform?
Just because you said you'd use Flux so you could get a consistent outcome. But as in like you as in the developer or you as in what you're providing. So is a developer using Flux or you just mean that you're going to use Flux?
I would use Flux for probably the platform level. And then depending on the skill set of the organization, they would figure out what makes sense.
But how am I self-serving? So now there's a bit of cubes.
Because you already use Git. The developer already knows how to use Git, right? Presumably because that's there every day.Ey're checking stuff in and out. So there's like an app
in Git that I go to then be like, so yeah, I know how to use Git and I can do Git commits, but that's got nothing to do, like I can't do like Git show cloud resources or something, right? So just because I can commit code, why would I suddenly know about the cloud services from Git?
You don't need to. Why do you need to know?
Like, how do I get them then?
So
from Git,
you go through some level of building a pipeline and deploying code. So you've built a container, you've now published that container, and then maybe in a separate repository you have like environment configuration where you ask for that application to be deployed somewhere, as well as all of the dependencies that you need, and your interface is still Git.
That's what I'm saying about the dependencies I need. One of them is a cloud resource.
Yeah.
So I can declare it.
Terraform and Terraform operator. We already talked about that.
Yeah, I'm just saying though how a developer who's just in Git suddenly can now understand that there's a Terraform operator.
Oh, right. So how does a person in an organization know to use these services? Like,
you've given me a way to, like, you've given me some, like, you've said there's an operator which I don't know anything about because I'm a developer. How do I suddenly know how to consume this operator?
Some documentation or searching something, maybe like
examples,
module library, or some sort of catalog that exists somewhere that you consume.
And how do I know what to put in this spec?
Because it has documentation to say what you need, like optional variables and things that are already defined for you, or not optional, whatever.
So there'll be a bunch of things in here that I might not really fully understand, but then
hopefully you understand all of the things that you are given an option to change.
Right. Okay. So there'll be like a spec,
or like a really good description, obviously, that helps you understand, because you're not going to get it all right away, right? Yeah. It's like what is an instance type? How do I know which instance type is right for me? Yeah,
exactly.
But it's probably important because you're going to have developers that are a little bit more used to using cloud services and maybe used to the terminology or whatever, because their experience is different, of course. And then people that just aren't. So you have to do self-service well, you have to give a common way of each person with their experience being able to get a consistent thing.
Right. Okay. A common way for each experience to get a consistent thing. I think you know what you mean. So, but then if the experience is different, which is what you've just said,
So, like,
how do you get a common way with inconsistent experiences? Because it's like,
so like for example, you don't
isn't high,
Yeah.
but I'm consuming something that's
so you
somebody else's.
simplify, but let's say you don't want to. So Kubernetes as an example, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you put a wrapper over Kubernetes,
Yeah.
and you abstracted even Kubernetes away from
Kubernetes.
away from the developers, so that
Yeah.
they had like, I don't know, something to just go into and throw an image out or whatever, and then that was always
Like
the same.
Cloud Run.
Yeah, exactly, like Cloud Run.
Right, yeah.
And then something bad happens, and you've now like the developers that know how to potentially or could investigate and trying to debug and all that kind of stuff, it makes it harder for them to debug just because you've made it easier for someone else to get the first outcome. The first outcome being deployed my thing. But to make the whole cloud experience self-service, it's deploy, manage, run, observe, all of the things. So you're not just
can't just facilitate just getting something.
developing. Yeah, you can't just facilitate
You've got to also
deploying
manage
once.
that thing you've got.
Exactly.
There's a life cycle of it.
And it's got a life cycle, and you've got to do it in a way that doesn't like abstract away the value or the experience that people might have.
Yeah. So you would choose Kubernetes and give them a way to look at the operator specs, to say, here's a bunch of operator specs.
Not the operator.
But with a spec of the custom resource.
Here's a way to get the use these custom resources to get an RDS or an S3 or
exactly. That's what I mean. So they have to learn
SQL
those custom resource
whatever.
definitions in some ways.
Not really learn them; they're just documented, and it's just learning living documentation.
Yeah.
Maybe
and what happens
there's
when the Terraform operator keeps changing? Just it's like keep updating the docs.
Maybe it's self-documenting. Yeah, maybe it just it's Kubernetes, right?
And would you provide just one type for everyone, or would you have different types of database configurations for different scenarios? So like a big database or like an Aurora database or a Postgres database, and then different flavors of each one.
Good question. I guess that's
different versions
to a certain degree down to the operator, because it has it, right?
And versions
of
that thing, because obviously the versions would be versions of the.
But that would just be like configuration, I guess. So you would just be able to state the version that you want, making sure that version is supported, and you only get the supported versions. Yeah. And then you obviously need a way to upgrade versions and manage the life cycle. Yeah, exactly. Sounds like I've solved it. This is a great.
Yeah, it sounds really easy. So you'd just be a magic operator.
Magic.
That's self-documenting.
Yeah, that checks against security policy. Maybe policies. Tells you the cost of the thing that you're about to run, because you're offloading. There's this whole shift left security movement. But people don't really talk about shift left in terms of cost.
Yeah.
And being able to like make developers at least responsible, or make aware, it visible, aware of the decisions that they're making, and cost is like a really good example of that. Like
infra costs.
Yeah, exactly. So
they have an API for that.
The infra cost is an API that you can use with Terraform. So using something that wraps all of that.
Cool. So Kubernetes, an operator around Terraform, standardized modules or standardized configuration of Terraform around those modules, or around the operator of those modules, however it's going to work.
Yeah.
Documenting them, versioning in line with them.
Sounds like a lot of work.
And lifecycle management of them, and security testing.
Don't write your own operator, guys.
And security of them. So you'd be like, and then also awareness, like visibility of those things.
Yeah.
And then all of that would happen somehow inside of the account, the cloud account. What about the IAM permissions and all the identity management, pod identity management, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I guess you need some way of managing the things that get created, and whether that is like depending on your kind of security profile, flat which is not good, not recommended, or specific to just the workload that needs to access.
So you'd have to make sure there's permissions for each thing that you're doing. The operator had the permissions to go and do those things to provision it.
Yeah.
Inside that account.
Exactly. Which is complicated. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are solutions out there that take care of
which
these
is already a
problems.
thing anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Terraform basically is godlike, isn't it, in most organizations? Because it literally can create all of the things and all the IAM, do all the things in all the accounts centrally, usually most of the time. But that's fine. That's okay. But what isn't good is that
with
thing
Terraform,
gets access. Like, I'm really confused. But doesn't that have like loads of access?
Least privilege doesn't apply to Terraform in CI, okay?
Yeah. If it's in CI,
doesn't matter.
Fine. That's fine.
CI never gets hacked.
CI never gets hacked. So yeah, it's fine. All right, so that's really good. So basically, you take certain technology stacks, blend them in for consistency, make some decisions on like how people are already working, try and standardize on that way of working, and then take technologies and extend those technologies around other technologies that are more industry aligned to then be like, actually, let's now create a pattern around all of this where it becomes more self-service.
And you're not just doing this for the sake of doing it, although it sounds really fun to do. You're obviously doing this so that developers can deliver software quickly and consistently in a secure way.
Cool.
So that they can actually focus on delivering business value.
Cool. All right, well, there you go.
Done. Solved.
That's it. Solved problem. I think that's the end of the episode, actually, because we're already running out of time for this episode. So, obviously, reach out to us if you've got any questions. hello@cloudunplugged.io, and then Cloud Unplugged on Twitter, which you'll be able to find us, and on the other platforms, LinkedIn. Cool. Speak to you soon.
Thanks all.
Bye.